Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're covering a few more buyouts that we've seen from basically everywhere all over the market. The market is extremely volatile right now, between the tins coming out, the upcoming release of Rage of the Abyss, and of course all of the hype for sets like Crossover Breakers and the Quarter Century Bonanza by the end of the year. That said, this is almost going to be like a continuation of the last Market Watch, where we're going to take a look at just whatever is currently trending from all of these various aspects of the market. Let's get started. Alright, kicking things off, we have Eperly Noir. So this card is one of the middle stage Pearly monsters, not one of the main deck level ones, and not one of the X-Pearlies. This card is a little bit more situational for the Pearly deck to go into. It lets you discard a card, then return an opponent's card back to the hand, but you get to return 2 cards if this card is equipped with a Pearly Sleepy Memory. Now this card came out back in Duelist Nexus, a bit later than the other Pearly cards from Amazing Defenders, but it might have been a bit easy to overlook since I think Sleepy Memory was the Pearly card from that set that everyone was going crazy for. Despite that, this card is, I believe, typically played at just 1 in most Pearly decks, so interestingly enough, this card is trending and saw a big bump up in price after the 2024 tins reprinted the majority of the Pearly archetype. Back in Rarity Collection 2, we saw the expensive pieces in Pearly, My Friend Pearly, and Pearly Pretty Memory get reprinted, and then in the tins, basically all of the other cards got reprinted as well, so pretty much the entire deck can be built out of bulk. However, Eperly Noir was for some reason excluded from the 2024 tins, even though it was printed in Duelist Nexus, and Duelist Nexus cards like Revolution Synchron and the Chimeras were included. Because of this, we've seen a notable bump up in the price of Noir. The ultra rares were down at $2 to $3, they're now up to between $7 and $10 each. This is the second such price bump that we've seen from this card, as it did bump up similarly back when Rarity Collection 2 came out, but this time around I think you are much more likely to be able to actually move the card, since it's extremely likely that players will already have the entire rest of the core aside from this card, so be sure to throw this card into your trade binders and have it ready to offload at your locals. The next card we have here is sort of an unexpected one. It is Fighting Flame Sword. Now this card is probably pretty easy to overlook. You might have come across it when you were hunting for bonfires back in Maze of Millennia, and then were immediately disappointed when you realized it was the wrong fire spell card. Fighting Flame Sword is a support card for the Flame Swordsman theme, and this is actually a very versatile card that can provide 3 different effects. It can search for a card that mentions Flame Swordsman in its text, it can pop a card when your Fire Warrior is involved in a battle, or it can negate the effect of something that targets a Flame Swordsman monster you control. So yeah, like, obviously Flame Swordsman isn't going to be anywhere close to meta relevant anytime soon, but there's definitely going to be casual players that want to put the Flame Swordsman deck together, and for those players this is a really strong card. Now the reason that this card is trending is actually because of another card that was reprinted in the tins, that being Fighting Flame Swordsman. These 2 cards were the expensive pieces for the deck, as they were 2 of the ultra rares in Maze of Millennia, but naturally with one of them getting reprinted, the other one becomes more sought after as players try to complete the whole core. That said, it's not a huge jump up in price since the deck still isn't really that good, but the card did go from being $3 or $4 before for most of its lifetime to now sitting just under the $10 mark, which is a good chunk for some legacy support. Definitely double check if you have any of these in your bulk if you did crack open Maze of Millennia, and see if you can move these for some unexpected value. Alright, so this is sort of a funny one. We have Artifact Durandal. This card is a generic rank 5 monster, and it has a couple of interesting effects. It can either change your opponent's monster's effect to force them to pop one of your back row, or it can shuffle their hand back into the deck and make your opponent draw the same number of cards. Now that first effect is obviously meant to be used by the artifact theme, but it's the second effect that this card is being looked at for. So the Ryziel deck is able to spam level 4 bodies onto the field pretty easily, so they can make rank 4s without too much effort. Because of this, some players are looking at running Tellarknight Ptolemaeus in the extra deck and then using its effect to go into Durandal. On top of that, Droll and Lockbird is a pretty decent card in the current format, as it can hurt things like the Fiendsmith engine. That said, you can pretty naturally run the Durandal and Droll combo, where after your opponent resolves a search effect, you activate Durandal and then chain the effect of Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird prevents your opponent from adding cards from deck to hand, so Durandal will try to resolve as much as possible, returning your opponent's hand to the deck, but then stopping them from drawing any replacement cards. Obviously it does seem a little bit cheesy, but the fact that it just requires a couple of extra deck spots, and then Droll and Lockbird, which is a card that a bunch of people are playing anyways, makes it not as gimmicky as it may seem. Anyways, there is also some people that are wanting to run this card in the extra deck in hat format, which has boomed in popularity recently, since it could be a useful tech in there, but I do believe that most people just run Pleiades instead. Durandal has a few ultra printings, including a relatively recent one that makes all of those versions still under $1. It's just the ultimate rare that has jumped up in price, as this card was down at around $8 to $10 before, but is now up to between $20 and $25. This is definitely a cool card to own, and it's a really nice ultimate rare, but if you don't really care much for the rarity, definitely consider picking up one of the much more affordable ultra rares and offloading this while the card is seeing some hype. Okay, so here's a really random card that we saw bought out within the last few days. It's Aestheticism of the 6 Samurai. Now this card is one that I hated having to play against back in the day. It lets you target a 6 Samurai monster that you control and summon another one from your deck with a different name, but the same number of attack points. 6 Samurais are a pretty combo heavy deck, and back then you could target Elder to summon Kagemusha and make a Shien basically for free. Now 6 Samurais are getting some new support cards in Rage of the Abyss, and I think that the cards are actually pretty decent. Probably not enough to make it top tier, but if you let them combo off uninterrupted, they'll do some pretty crazy stuff and build some insane end boards. Of course, 6 Samurais are one of the most loved strategies in the history of the game, so there will definitely be some dedicated players that are looking to pick the deck up once again. Aestheticism is something that I've seen sort of all over the place. A few lists online were playing this card at 3. I think Lithium only had 1 in his build. This card isn't a once per turn effect, which is really cool, but at the same time it does require another 6 Samurai monster for you to be able to do anything with it. However, apparently some people have decided to attempt to basically buy out Aestheticism, as most copies of it have disappeared from TCG Player. The original rare from Storm of Ragnarok, as of the time I'm filming this, is actually down to less than 5 copies, and most of them are lightly played or damaged. They do have sold listings for near mints at around $8. I think the cheapest is $10, and then the card eventually got a super rare upgrade in Spirit Warriors. These were technically $20 at one point, but they've since cooled off price-wise and have settled around the $10 to $15 range. Hopefully this card does get reprinted fairly soon, or if you want to play it, then hopefully a friend will have some lying around, because both of its printings are actually quite difficult to find. Alright, so this is a bit of an odd one. We're taking a look next at Rescue Ace Hydrant. The Rescue Ace deck is obviously no longer what it was before, back when Airlifter was at 3, but the deck is still pretty decent. It can make use of Promethean Princess really well, and setting 4 cards from out of your deck is basically always going to be a good thing. However, the deck has always been a step behind decks like Snake Eye and Yubel, and even with those decks getting hit on the most recent ban list, I don't think that Rescue Ace is quite able to match those other strategies. However, the deck is still a really solid tier 2 deck, and on top of this, most of the cards were actually reprinted in the 2024 tins. One of the key ones that wasn't, however, was Rescue Ace Hydrant, which actually already got a super rare reprint in Maze of Millennia. However, that was quite a while ago and it was pretty hard to pull, so with players now having access to the rest of the cards that were included in the tins, we've now seen the price of Hydrant jump up pretty significantly. Obviously, Hydrant's a very important card for the deck, being a once per turn search and turning on the additional effects of those spell and trap cards. The original ultra rare copies from Amazing Defenders had fallen down to a few dollars, but we now actually see them at an insane $20 to $22 each, and then with the super rare reprints, which are supposed to be the budget ones, they were only a few dollars before, but even those are up to almost $10 per copy. The effect here we see is the exact same as what we saw happen with Eperly Noir, where the rest of the core is now just so accessible that players scramble and look to buy up the next hardest card to find, because that's the one that players are going to need in order to complete their deck cores. This card was just a super back in Maze of Millennia, so it was probably extremely easy to overlook. Definitely go back through your hollow bulk to make sure that you didn't dump any of these accidentally. This is a pretty interesting one. We next have Book of Eclipse. It's a card that probably seems pretty bad if you're reading it for the first time and you've never read it before. It's actually seen quite a bit of competitive play over the years. This card flips all monsters on the field to face down defense position, and then during the end phase, all of your opponent's monsters are flipped face up, and your opponent draws a card for each one flipped. Now, depending on the matchup, this card can be really good, and I believe that in the current format, it's actually pretty useful. This card's useful going first or second. Going first, I can set this card and flip it on my opponent's Samsara D Lotus face down before they can use its effect, and hopefully I can end their turn right there. Or going second, you can potentially use this to break through boards, destroy their monsters before they can proceed to the end phase, or at the very least, force out some sort of negate. Book of Eclipse isn't a card I'm particularly fond of personally, but it has definitely been seeing an uptick in competitive usage over the last little while, and that's being reflected in the card's price. Fortunately, Book of Eclipse did get a reprint in Rarity Collection 2, so it has a ton of printings available that are basically dirt cheap. The printings that we want to make note of here are the QCRs and the Platinum Secret Rares. The QCRs were down at around $10 to $12 before. They've shot up to just over $20 within the last couple of weeks. And then the Platinums are the other version worth mentioning. They're currently around $2 to $3 each right now. Aside from that, the card has really nice secret rare printings. I believe I really like the one from Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge, but then the Astral Pack Super is really nice as well. It's just that those are extremely cheap because of the Rarity Collection treatment that this card got. At the very least, find a set of this card in whatever specific rarity you like to play with and keep it for yourself, just in case you do decide to run it. Alright, the final card we have to talk about for today is Nightmare Apprentice. This is one that I was kind of actually surprised to see was trending upwards. It's a generic illusion monster that is actually really strong. You summon it by discarding another card, and it searches for any illusion monster from your deck as well. Now, in the current format, this card isn't particularly crazy. I believe that the only deck that currently uses it is the Chimera deck, since they do play several illusion monsters. But even then, they're only a tier 2 strategy, and even then, Nightmare Apprentice is generally played as just a one-of. Now technically, we did see all of the Chimera cards in the 2024 tins, so we could see something like what we saw with Pearly and Rescue Ace. However, Nightmare Apprentice was the expensive piece, while also the cards that got reprinted were mostly pretty cheap, so it's actually kind of weird to see that Nightmare Apprentice would be the thing that's trending upwards in price. However, that's what happened, as the card was down between $25 and $30 before, but it's now shot up to just under the $40 mark. Realistically, this card won't be reprinted until the 2025 tins, and if you're just counting on Chimera to be a top tier strategy eventually, that's probably not going to be enough to keep this card's price up there. What's ultimately going to determine just how high this card's price stays is whether or not we get another good illusion deck sometime within the next year that will make this card more meta relevant, though thus far it doesn't seem like that'll be the case. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. Definitely a ton of scattered things everywhere. I feel like there's not one single thing that's affecting a ton of things on the market. Rather, it's a culmination of all of the different things that are happening with products and events and future support that's causing a ton of different buyouts all over the market. But we do have the Rage of the Abyss premiere event happening next weekend, so best of luck with you guys' pulls. And I'm definitely going to be looking forward to pulling Fool Loss and Dominus Impulse as well. Hopefully you guys get some as well. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's market watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.